It's the journey that is going to shape who you are. It's the journey that is life. Life is just a series of stopping out fires. Every single day we show up in our businesses, it's just stopping out fires and learning how to solve problems.
This is the Aesthetics Growth Podcast.
I'm super excited. Hey, everybody, it's Bref, and we're back with another episode of the Aesthetics Growth Podcast. Today, I'm joined by an absolute powerhouse in the beautiful industry of aesthetics. I've got Dr. Lanna Cheuck with us. Now, Dr. Lanna is a board-certified urologic surgeon, founder of LC Medical and Surgical Aesthetics. She's a global educator, speaker, CEO. She's been featured in Forbes, serves as a key opinion leader for InMode and for a number of national organizations. She's the co-founder of Face Med Store, the Aesthetic Nexus, Face Med Spa. I can't wait to learn more about her story and to share this with you today. Dr. Lanna, welcome to the show. That was just a small segment of your incredible experience. I can't wait for you to share this with the audience today.
That's awesome, Bref. Thank you so much for having me. First of all, I love your energy. I love talking about all things growth-related mindset, growth mindset. So this is amazing. Perfect. Thank you so much for having me on your show.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, let's get into it because I got a feeling that we could do like a 10-part series just speaking with you because you've got so much experience and we're getting to know you a little bit over the last couple of years. I've seen that. I've kind of, seen the journey. And as you mentioned, there's so much involved between mindset, there's business. We were talking a little bit about family before the show as well. So for people that don't know you, I'd love to, to have you just explain a little bit about your journey, how you got started, and we'll unpack it as we get through the show today.
Yeah, absolutely. Everyone has their own journey. And I always say that everyone has a good story. And, I get on stages and I talk about my story. I love to be a visual storyteller. People that relate to me, I'm a mother. I have 2 young girls with special needs. My story actually starts even before me. It starts with my parents' immigration and escape from communism during the Cultural Revolution in the 1940s. I'm just going to briefly talk about their story because, there's so much to unpack there. But they basically built a raft. They fell in love working on the rice fields with leeches buried into their skin. Their job was to grow rice on the rice fields. My mother's job was to take feces from outhouses, and just dispose of them. And so they fell in love and they wanted a better life for their future children because back then, if you weren't rich and if you weren't like really smart, you would not have access to education. So my parents grew up with like a 7th grade education and they decided to escape. They built a raft because my uncle was a general in the army. They had access to some ping pong paddles, a compass, and some adhesives. And so they built a raft. And one fateful night, they left their cave with their raft and with ping pong paddles and a compass. They arrived to Macau, was now a huge city. But back then, everything worked out in such a way that the dogs didn't wake up, the guards didn't see them. They escaped, and then they got smuggled onto a vegetation boat in China to Hong Kong. They were drugged so that they wouldn't make any noise. And so from that, they were able to come into the U.S. And, I'm a second child. And as you guys know, China had the one-child policy. So were they not, and that was just until recent too. So would they not have taken the biggest risk of their lives to escape so that their future children could have a chance of education opportunities? I wouldn't be here. And so knowing that, and all immigrant, parents, what do they want for their children, especially with that story and sacrificing their lives, they want their children to become doctors, right? And so that's what I did. I became a doctor. And so, and I think you do know this part of the story, Bref. I don't know if you've heard this part about how I kind of, how I basically, I became a urologist. I was, less than 1% of minority women in robotic urology. And, here's the thing with us, like, type A personalities and, people who are people pleasers that, want to always excel. When you get to the top, you're kind of like, well, what else is there? And, so being, I was a urologist for about 7 years and I got pregnant. And when I got pregnant, everything changed. I still worked until the last day until I actually delivered prematurely. I started bleeding and I delivered prematurely. My daughter was only 30 weeks old and 2 pounds when she was born. She was in the NICU for 3 months. And then we learned she was blind. We learned that she had a lot of other, kind of issues that kept her in the hospital. hospital, and she underwent like 7 surgeries by the time she was even like a full-term baby. And everything changes when you have children. I know, Bref, you have children too. And
Yeah.
so when something like that happens to you that's so life-changing, you kind of have to pivot a bit, and you have to kind of re-examine your life. And is my life being lived
Mm,
by somebody else, like my parents, telling me that they want me to live a certain way, they want me to be a doctor, they want me to do all these things. But when things change, and now I'm no longer living for myself, I'm actually living for my children now. And things all started happening very quickly. When I was 8 months pregnant with my second child, I actually got fired from the hospital. And this is after I gave everything, never took a vacation for 5 years, gave everything to my patients. I realized that people don't value you, and when people don't value you, you have to value yourself. So when
mm,
I got called into the HR department's office at 8 months pregnant, they knew I was about to give birth. They said, "You're getting fired." And let me tell you, I wasn't getting fired because I wasn't good enough, because I was the number, like one of the first, like the top 3 producers in I hate the word producers, but that's what they
yep.
value you at, right?
Sure.
It's because
Hmm.
I asked for equal pay to my male colleagues, and they thought that I was, making waves. I was a cage rattler, which I never considered myself that. I just thought, I have a child with special needs. She was born blind. She had detached retinas when she was born, and she's autistic. And I was having my second child. I was at 42 years of age having my second child, and I thought, you know what? I need to have equal pay. And I asked, and that was my mistake. Then I was put into this other category that, doesn't just follow the norm, keep my head down, and just do whatever they asked me to do. Now I was considered someone they couldn't control, just simply from asking for equal pay. And so I think things, that light bulb moment happens. Ref, I don't know if you've ever had like that, like light bulb moment where, you're kind of like, well, let me get off this bathroom floor crying, and let me just start making things for things happen for
Mm.
myself. And so I kind of dove in 100% into aesthetics.
Wow. 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 Okay. So, wow, that is really incredible. I certainly didn't know the ins and outs. And thank you so much for sharing that. I mean, woven into that incredible growth story, and we've only just got to the tip of the iceberg there, really, from, what you've done with business and everything, but talking about getting over adversity. Certainly, I will tell the story about coming from nothing as well, but certainly nothing that compares to that adversity and persecution that your family had to deal with to, first of all, create an opportunity to come to an area and to create opportunity to start a life and start a family, and then everything that you've done to that point as well. I just want to recognize that at the top of the show. That's absolutely incredible. Do you feel or in what ways, growing up with the knowledge and kind of that, that your family is doing something, they weren't given anything, they talk about their history, where they came from, you're growing with that environment, and then you're dealing with that as well in the professional way, where you're seeing that there's you're not just being treated fairly,
Mhm.
and you've got that ambition inside. We'd love to know just how that has shaped you, and kind of that, maybe that just that growth that happened through those years, because that is quite incredible.
Yeah, I think, a lot of us are very much people pleasers. As first generation, Chinese American, we always feel like, what can we do to fit in? What can we do to make everyone else like us? What can we do so that we're seen at the same level, given the same value? And I think that's being an immigrant, being a woman, a minority. I think, a lot of us feel like we're, how do we be seen in the same lens as everybody else? And the answer is really, number one, you work, twice as hard, if not 5 times as hard. Being an osteopathic physician in urology at Brown University was pretty much unheard of. And so I actually faced a lot of even like persecution, as you used the word, there too, because, they were like, well, are you an MD? What are you? Are you even a doctor? And so, and then also the way that I look and appear, my short stature, like I'm short, I'm not tall, and as a woman. And so like all, kind of all my life, I've always felt like I've like lived in a shadow, and just tried to please people in order to find worth. So and I don't know if you relate to this, and maybe you don't, but when you go through
Certainly.
life, and yeah, I feel like we all do, right? We all kind of like, are we, what is our value? Are we worth it? And then we find things to make ourselves feel worth it, or we find people to make us feel like we belong and that, we're worth it. And, I don't think that ever goes away. Like, I still feel like I'm like trying to, find my way in aesthetics. I know you've kind of, put out there that I've been in this field for so long, but there's always an imposter syndrome that we always have. Like, do we belong
Mm,
here? Are we invited to the table? Do we get a seat at the table? Then something switched inside me to say, you know what? If I'm not invited to the table, I'm going to bring my own seat to the table. I'm going to build my own table. And so I think there's a
love that.
part of that that drives me. So yes, absolutely. I think adversity drives success. And, I always talk about this in my talks, but, I always say like growth is never linear. It's never exponential. It's not like one day you wake up and you're like, I'm gonna, break the glass ceiling and traverse the stratosphere. It's always a struggle. It's always an up and down. And my goal, in even coming to this podcast, and my goal in life in general, is just to help one person a day, whether that's inspiring them to, go with ignite their passion or reignite their passion. That's what I do every day. And the things that I get the most excited about is when someone comes up to me and they say, I've heard you on a podcast, I listened to one of your educational talks. I saw you talk on stage, and I was motivated. I was inspired. I speak to medical students, I don't get paid for any of that. It's not about the money. It's about, one day when someone tells me, Dr. Lana, I was actually about to quit medical school. And when I heard you speak, it reignited my passion and I'm going to keep with it. And so things like that is what keeps me motivated to do what I do. So if I can find passion every day in helping one person a day, whether it's making them feel beautiful and confident or making
Yeah.
them feel like they can go out there and crush it in the world, and being the best version of themselves, the 2.0 version of themselves, like that's why I do what I do. So absolutely adversity has shaped me. What my family went through has shaped me, and how my kids see me as this like powerful leader has shaped me too, because I have to show up every single day being so powerful so that they can see that and they themselves can have confidence in themselves to be that way
Mm,
too.
that really is beautiful, and some of the things you mentioned there, just with I can totally relate to that. I'm sure that our listeners and our audience can too, just from personal experience, and certainly when building a business. And that at some level it starts off with it's the person that builds the business, and you grow a team. And there's different aspects of, but I see them as kind of this. They're so parallel with struggles in life and growth in life, and dealing with adversity, and also like from a business standpoint as a startup, as you have done multiple businesses as well,
Mhm.
making those breakthroughs. And with the well, it was a couple of things there. Certainly, when you're dealing with adversity, and when nothing is kind of given or granted, you have to hustle, right? From an education standpoint, you've invested a lot throughout your life to increase your knowledge, and then to share that as well. We'll talk about through the show as well with how you're doing that within the industry. And one thing I think that a lot of our listeners will benefit from too is what you mentioned, and we haven't really spoke about this on the show yet, Dr. Lana, is that imposter syndrome. It was so cool listening to you talk about coming from another country, right, where it's there's different maybe cultural norms, and it's just they're different. You're coming from a different environment and sometimes an upbringing, and then you're looking to achieve and to create a new life for yourself and for your family. And then you kind of mix in today's social media as an example too,
Mhm.
with what other colleagues are doing, other businesses, etc. And for especially for new medical spas and practices and entrepreneurs building their business, having to deal with that comparison game. And so I'd love to hear a little bit about how you have worked on that, how you've kind of dealt with that imposter syndrome. At the beginning of the show, we mentioned mindset, which I think is really at
Mhm.
the center of pretty much everything that we're going to talk about today. We'd love to see if you have any kind of insights or lessons that you might like to share with the audience relative
Yeah,
to that.
I think I'll talk quickly about mindset. I think a lot of us have a lot of scarcity mindset. And actually, going into this, I feel like I also had a lot of scarcity mindset. I can actually, because I've trained so many injectors, physicians, entrepreneurs, I can actually tell when someone is going to be very successful or not within the first 5 minutes that I
Mm,
meet them. And the reason
wow.
why I can tell that is because there's just something about them. They give value. They don't have that scarcity mindset. it's not what can you do for me, but it's what I can do for you, or what I can do to bring value to people. I think the people that have the abundance mentality, the abundance mindset, they're the ones that really get it, right? And there's a law of like the abundance, right? And it's really it's karma, it's a law. But if you are giving value out there and you show up every day just, as your best self, and you're helping other people, everything comes back to you tenfold. So I do feel like part of my success has been, me educating other people, me helping other people. People text me, they DM me, they Facebook me, right? I'm on it right away. I get back to them, I answer them. I am somebody who's very accessible, and I feel like me being able to see that like little spark in someone. Number one, you have to have your why, you have to have your passion. My why are my kids. My why is to help other people and uplift other people. I kind of like see myself. Someone actually told me, they're like, you're like the aesthetic motivator. Like there's a lot of like
Mm,
motivational speakers, like and then like these amazing like Tony Robbins, who are like I love, and
massive Tony Robbins fan.
right. And I've actually never even listened to Tony Robbins or heard of, but I know of Tony Robbins. And if I could actually bring in a little bit of that. But yeah, I think the abundance like mindset is everything. And the people who are like, I'm going to keep this to myself, I'm going to keep
Mm,
all the education to myself, I'm going to go out there and troll your posts because I don't want you to win. I've had a lot of other injectors, physicians, actually come after me. This is a negative side of aesthetics that you're probably not asking for, but I'm going to just talk about because it's a
let's
very
bring it.
real
Just
thing.
let's yeah,
Um,
raw and real. I love
yeah,
it.
we're
Let's bring it
rolling.
all.
And so we're going to talk about this. I've had other injectors reach out to my patients through social media to say, why are you going to her? Don't go to her. I've had people make fake profiles of me with my face blacked out to say, don't go to her. So I've dealt with a lot of that negativity. So when you say, put yourself out there, there's some negativity that comes with it. But what I realize is that we are all given a microphone. If you want to empower women, give her a microphone. If you want to empower
Mm,
any business, give them a microphone, give them a platform. Nowadays, with social media, everything has changed. It's all digital marketing. It's all getting yourself out there. People like you for you. They resonate with you because of who you are. And so there's people for everybody. And that's what I love to impart to other people. Don't have such a small mindset, a scarcity mindset. You will be successful because you are a good person and you like to help other people. I help my competition every single day. I tell them how I do things. They ask me how many units of toxin am I putting in this area. I tell them, I educate them, I teach them because they're going to learn anyways. And why not all come together and rise as a community? And that's another part of what I've done, Bref, is like I've built a community on Facebook
yeah.
that about, the Aesthetic Medicine and Wellness Group. It's because, in building community, we it's not just about leverage, to these other bigger companies. I started Face Med Store with Hardik Soni, my partner, because I realized there was power in numbers. And when you have a community that you built together and you come in and you say, you know what, I'm going to buy things in bulk because, we have 30 something thousand, members in our organization, we're able to get better pricing, and so
Mm,
we share that better pricing with everyone. That's how Face Med Store came about. So I think, a lot of it, Bref, and you know this better than anyone, is really building community, giving value, having that abundance mentality, sharing knowledge, and just being really good to other people. Building relationships is the most important thing when it comes to, building yourself and amplifying your voice.
yeah, 100%. I love it. And, with that as well, it's tremendous. See over 30,000 members within the aesthetic medicine group now.
Yeah. Yeah,
That's
with
awesome.
both we have a physician group, and then yeah, kind of nurses, PAs, NPs. That's the
Yeah.
group that gets so much engagement. That's actually one of my favorite groups.
It's just one thing you mentioned there as well. And I was at speaking recently where we were talking about it comes back to the mindset a little bit too, with the growth mindset and the scarcity mindset and the competition or collaboration. And you just referenced that there as well with the building relationships, uplifting together, because the rising tide raises all boats sort of mindset. What was it like, when you look at kind of going from the hospital where you kind of got put into the rebel bracket, right? Oh, disruption, no, like not conforming to the rules. What was it like to kind of to break free from that, or to break free from those shackles, if you will, to
Mhm.
starting your business?
It's so funny because I never thought of myself as a rebel. I've always, listen, I'm an obedient Asian, girl growing up. And I didn't realize that asking for equal pay was rattling cages and being a rebel, and it really shouldn't, right? It shouldn't be considered
Right.
going against the grain. It's really what should, what we should be asking for is transparency and equal pay. I think the change and the challenge is me being a rebel now. I find myself being more of a rebel now because, going, against the grain of what everyone else does, is being the rebel in my mind. So, there comes a time, in midlife with like things just need to pivot, and it's okay to pivot. It's okay. We're all so scared because, we spent our whole lives being this one thing, this one person. I was like the 1% of robotic surgeons, and now I'm injecting faces, and people like,
Mm,
are
yeah.
like, what does it feel like to give up everything that you've ever done and worked for? And I get it. I was a very highly skilled, probably still am a very highly skilled trained surgeon, and now I inject people's faces. It doesn't mean it's any less, and so I think for the people that feel like I fell off, or should feel a little bit disappointed in my life's trajectory, I think it's the opposite. I think I feel like I'm more successful now than I've ever been because, the value that I get from my patients either flying in to see me, or a physician or a nurse coming to see me and getting trained by me and saying, wow, I'm so happy to meet you. You've inspired me. I feel like I get so much more value being this version 2.0 version of Dr. Lana. First I was Dr. Cheuck, now I'm like Dr. Lana because I'm very approachable and people come up to me and they feel like they're my friends and we built relationships. Like, I feel like that it gives me so much more value. It makes me so much happier. So I think for anybody out there who's like, pivoting, made the pivot or thinking about pivoting, whether it's work-life balance, whether it's not getting, paid, not having autonomy, being burnt out, all those things are so real and
Mm,
tangible. And I think it's so, it's something that everyone is experiencing. And for those who have made the jump, whether it's entrepreneurship in general, into aesthetics or not into aesthetics, just something different, as long as you have a why, a passion, a talent, we're all learning every single day. Nobody knows, coming out of medical school, we never took business, so we don't really know how to run a business. I could tell you, Bref, how the hardest things it for me is really building a team, being a good
mm.
leader, being a good CEO, working on the business and in the business. I mean, those are the tough things that I'm happy to get into because those are the things that, no one tells you. It's actually much harder than being a robotic surgeon.
For sure. I definitely want to get into that because what you just mentioned there as well. Really going from the you're working through the hospital system, and then you mentioned something I thought was really interesting, where some people saw that there's reinvention. You started a new business, and some people might have thought that as it sounded like almost like there might be a perception of a step down, but from what I've heard, and I think from what the audience is hearing, is that your reinvention and the risk that you took to start your own business, to prioritize your family, as we discussed a little bit earlier as well, and for you to follow your passion and to follow your heart, that really is what people look for, is that purpose, that satisfaction, that kind of close to self actualization. So it's just is interesting. I think that, and I get it. There might be people that look at it like, oh, if someone is a lawyer and then they become a podcaster or whatever it is, that change, but they're following their heart, they're following their passion, and they're making impact, like you mentioned as well, with the patients that you're impacting, the students that you're impacting, the audience you're impacting, and you've created a lifestyle as well where you're able to do this. You're able to increase the reach of your voice to help more people. You've got days that you've set to do things where you're working on the business. And speaking of that, let's maybe talk about that as well, because I love talking about leadership, something I'm always working on myself, and our listeners too. Certainly, growing a business, I think that is one of the biggest challenges. Is you go from maybe an employee to a business owner operator, and then leading with an intentionality. I think is a pivotal part of that whole process. So I'd love to learn from you, and for our audience to hear how your journey has been relative to that.
Yeah, I always say, the journey is never a straight line up. There's ups and downs, peaks and valleys. What I've realized, in my, 48 years of life is that there's never a destination. And if you will find purpose
Mm,
and happiness in a destination, you will never get there. What I've realized in the last few years of entrepreneurship is you gotta enjoy the journey because it's the journey that is going to shape who you are. It's the journey that is life, right?
Hmm.
One of my actually Hardik Soni said this to me one time when I was having a really bad day and I called him crying. He said to me, life is just a series of stomping out fires, and most of the fires we create ourselves. But it really
Yeah.
is true. Most of it's self-inflicted, all the stuff that we go through. But really, every single day we show up, in our businesses is just stomping out fires and learning how to solve problems. Have you ever seen the movie The Martian?
The Martian. I haven't recently.
Okay, so he basically gets stuck in outer space, and he has to
Okay.
science the hell out of him living for like 2 years with
Who's
food.
who's the actor in it again? And there's a big actor in it,
Matt
right?
Damon.
Matt
Matt
Damon.
Damon.
Okay, yes. Thank you. Okay, jogging the
So
memory
like
there.
every day I feel like I'm the Martian, and every day I'm like calculating like what we have to do in order to survive, right? So I think
Yeah.
it's a funny analogy, right? It's like he's like rationing food and ketchup, right? And we're like, how do we make this happen every day so that we survive, right, until we get saved, right? So it's not about the destination, it's about the journey. So if you don't enjoy the journey, then what's the point, right? And
Mm,
I always find that with entrepreneurs, if you haven't failed, if you haven't been rejected, if the world is not like burning down around you, then you haven't really experienced entrepreneurship.
you're striking a core there. Absolutely.
Right? If you don't have an ex partner or someone who's tried to come after you, and someone who's trying to burn your place down and take over everything,
Yeah.
that no, with all jokes aside, being an entrepreneur is not for the faint of heart. It's not easy. People see the social media and the glitz and the glamour, but really underneath, it's an everyday hustling and every day trying to figure out, am I going to quit today or am I not going to quit today? I'm just being super real and authentic,
Yep.
and I get on and I inspire everybody else. But part of getting on and inspiring everybody else is to let everybody know what the true, the transparent, like this is the real raw stuff that we deal with every single day. I'm not perfect. I've had a lot of failures in my life, but those failures shape me and they teach me. But that is life. And so one thing didn't work out. I'm going to go right on to the next thing. And I think that's the great thing about entrepreneurs is
Mm,
number one, they don't quit. Number two, they're always reinventing. Number
yep.
three, they're always thinking of ways to expand. You get the one vertical and then you're trying to expand. And so, but it's very difficult. You got to build a good team. I always talk about building a dragon boat. You know what a dragon boat is? Where
I
like,
do
you have
indeed.
a dragon boat and, everyone on that team has to be rowing. And, they talk about this in the book Traction as well. But, some people are rowing the opposite direction, not helping you get to your goal. Some people don't row at all. I'm sure we all have ideas of who everyone seated at the right seat in order to get us all to that destination, and we don't always have that. So I do think having an important team, building an important team,
Mm,
is great. But being an entrepreneur, being a CEO, and being an injector, um, is a very, very hard thing, because it's almost like you can't really grow because you're always injecting. And if I'm the main injector, which I am, it's really tough to also, be the visionary,
yes.
yeah, and the integrator.
Yeah.
Can't be
Yeah,
both.
I want to unpack some of that because there's so much gold there for anybody listening. Number one, Traction. If anybody who's listening, watching, hasn't seen it, tremendous book. It sounds like you run your businesses on the EOS system as well with Gina Wickman, Traction. You also mentioned something I thought was really cool. Yesterday, Dr. Lanna, we had our Monday actually, our all hands team meeting, and we do a team member spotlight. One of our team members, she referenced something that it was very similar to what you said there as far as building a business or you're putting out fires, and the conversation you had with Dr. Hardick, as he said, you're always putting out fires, but those fires also when we create ourselves. Our team member Karina had said, one of the pieces of advice she gave to our team, because we asked them to give advice to everybody, was I figured out a way to worry less, because I understood that worrying meant that I had to go through the problem twice. The thing was going to occur anyway, had to get dealt with, but why worry about what may happen or not happen? If it doesn't happen, you're just moving forward, and there's no point in putting yourself through that pain twice. And you mentioned with obviously with Traction, building the business with team members, at the center of it is taking action, like you said, and use the visionary of your businesses. that's you. You know, you're the leader who has got the machete in their hands, and they're like, chopping out the bamboo out of the way, because you're carving paths forward to grow not only your business, but to bring your team with you as everybody's getting better together, and you're helping your patients to look better, to feel better, and to be better versions of themselves as well. And so, on the leadership perspective and growing the team, what did that look like as you were growing your businesses? Because there's struggles, there's hiring, there's firing, and what does it look like today?
Yeah, I mean, I would say when I first started, it was a hot mess, right? It's always still a hot mess. I started off with one person. And that one person was my everything. She was my medical
Mm,
assistant. She was my manager. She was my inventory person. She answered phones. And, I actually built like a seven-figure business with just that one person. And then we started taking on more people. And once we started taking on more people, then you need a team. And so I have multiple team members. I think we have like 20 people in my group. I think the most important thing is that you have the right person for the right role. And that's
right.
something that I think a lot of us, if someone comes in and they don't know what their like role is, then they don't have a clear vision of, what their role should be. I think that's when messy things can happen. So I do think that growing a team is number one, the hardest thing in the world, because they have to have your mindset. They have to see your
Hmm.
vision. They have to understand that vision with like crystal clear clarity. And then they have to like work like they're the CEO of the company. So how do you motivate your team? And I want to ask you, Bref, because you've built a team, you have member spotlights, amazing. If we can just shut down the business and have member spotlights, and I think everyone would do much better, but because every role is very, very important. But can
Yes.
you, yeah, tell me what you do?
Yeah. So, thank you for asking. I mean, with us, similar struggles growing a business from one man band to the point where we've got 45 team members based globally between U.S., Canada. Julian, who's producing our podcast here, is based in Colombia, as an example, and I think it came down to having a good framework. Number one, which is we love traction because as a company we're able to buy into it and we're able to share with our team. Also, what you said too, really important is, and we neglected that starting the business as well. When I started the business, it's cool. I'm starting the business, got clients, got customers, got patients. Here we go, and then it turned into, okay, we've got to have more. We've got to have a better foundation. So really made intentional efforts to articulate the mission, the vision, our core values. We actually, and we kind of, I think, re-articulate them and reinvented them a couple of years ago, because as a business, a growing business, like almost like an organism, we had changed from that startup to a more established business and a growth minded business. So I think that there are some of the key things similar to what you mentioned with there's traction, there's the hiring and the clarity of the roles, like you mentioned, spending the time to really clearly define what the mission of each of those roles is, what the outcomes, what success looks like for that person performing the role. And then throughout that process, the communication with team members of, awesome, cool. So we're both clear on what success looks like, and you're absolutely crushing it because I thought that was what success looks like, and you got to a whole new level. Or it's, this is what we define as success, and there's a little bit of a gap here. So let's talk about the gap. And
Mhm.
that way, it's not about the person, which was a struggle in earlier years of growing the business, but it's more about what is the gap, because we're all moving forward together, as essentially we try and form partnerships with our team members because we're moving forward together on a mission. So that I think for us, to answer your question, has been really pivotal, is getting back to what you said about the dragon boat, right? Is ensuring that we've got the right people in the right seats that are rowing in the right direction. And it takes that constant affirmation of, what is that direction? Okay, what is the vision? We can see the waves over there. What's past the waves? We want to know what that is too. Who's beside me? Do I trust that team member beside me? Who's on the bow? And all those things that you articulated as well.
Yeah, I think trust is a big thing when it comes to getting people on board. And I always say this when I every time I hire somebody, but if the people that you've hired, if you wouldn't hire them again, then they're not the right team member. And so it's really important. The hiring process is really important. Your front desk is really important. And actually, Brad talks about this. Everyone has to drink the Kool-Aid, right? They have to love aesthetics when they come in, and from the front desk to the person bringing you back to your medical assistant to the injector to the person checking you out. Everyone has to have a very similar goal, and so I think that's important. And you guys teach
Yeah.
this and leadership, and
Right.
so so it's great to also learn from you guys. So thank you so much.
Absolutely, absolutely. No, I mean, I love quote unquote geeking out on that stuff, and those core values we spoke about it recently as well. Having those really clear, and then they're kind of the compass for hiring. Are these the right people? Are they exemplifying our core values? And it's awesome too because then we get to reward from that. Cool, you just high five, you demonstrate our core values. That's fantastic. And over time, of course, if there's team members that aren't doing it, then it starts to become very visible. So we could do a whole podcast about that. But I want to come back to you as well
Yes.
because with your mission and what you're doing and the impact that you're creating, you've got multiple different businesses. So number one, how do you manage that with the different businesses, and what's hot? What are you seeing as trends? Because you've got a really beautiful ecosystem when you think about the communities, when you think about the products, and you think about the physical locations, multi locations as well. So we'd love to. I'm going to try to unpack it succinctly for you. Is how do you manage those multiple businesses? Is that you've got 20 team members, and then what are you seeing as kind of trends and what's hot within the ecosystem?
So I think all my businesses are kind of interrelated. They just kind of spawn out sometimes for necessity, right? Our
Mm-hmm.
face med store, as I talked to you about, it really was to, hey, let's buy in bulk so that we can save money. And, we can have cannulas and we can have exosomes and we can have microneedling pens that we can use so that we're not spending so much money, more pocket in, in the injectors, right? More money in injectors' pocket. So, yeah, I think you have to have the right people. Hardig and I have kind of created this community, and so there's something that he's really good at. He's really good at the back end stuff. I love to kind of teach, educate, and be front facing. So I think that also helps too. I think also just having a pulse on what's going on with everyone, and then being in these conferences and speaking on
Mm-hmm.
stages and being in a room with trailblazers and people in the aesthetics industry who are the giants. Even when before I even got into the field, like I saw them on stage and I was like, wow. And now I'm speaking next to them on stage. I mean, what a 360 moment, how amazing. I
Yeah.
do have a finger on the pulse, because I'm so engaged with our community and talking to injectors. I know what the pain points are. Even in our own practice, we did Hardig and we have, like, I want to say 10 practices now together, like separate, but like, added together. So and so I think in just navigating that, and helping other people figure things out, I think we become, more knowledgeable as well. Trends that are coming up in the industry,
Mm.
we're definitely seeing, less of, volumization. Before it was a lot of, let's volumize, let's get those lips big, let's get, the perception drift is a real thing when people don't really see, that the changes are really making them not look like themselves anymore. And so I think it's important for injectors to not to let their patients have that perception drift, to learn how to say no. But also there's been a lot of like bad press and bad marketing for fillers, which I want to get rid of completely. Fillers is amazing if done in the right way. My whole business is fillers. Fillers is my number one. People are still coming see me for fillers all day long. And I think it's because when you market yourself in such a way, people see that the little minute changes can overall make such a holistic, beautiful, youthful look. And so I do think that fillers has become less important and now more regenerative medical things are coming up in play. I see a lot more exosomes out there, PDRN. We're looking at PDGF. I've been doing a lot more PRP. All the things in the regenerative space, looking at things that build up your extracellular matrix. So I think all these things we're starting to understand. If you're kind of like unlocking and decoding aging and like biohacking aging and
Mm.
longevity, that is a really important part of it. It's not just, hey, I'm in my mid 40s now, I just need some fillers and toxin. Now it's what's happening on a cellular level, What are we understanding? How do we address every single layer of what's happening in your face, whether it's volumization, whether it's recreating more collagen and elastin using more energy-based devices. I think the whole field is going more into that, looking at wellness as a whole. And I also think that the two main things driving this breath, and I don't know if you've talked about this with any of your guests before, but the kind of the menopause movement is huge, right?
Yep.
So everyone's talking about menopause. Everyone's, celebrities are talking about it now. Physicians are more educated than ever, and they're trying to educate other people. It's a real thing. And to have a woman who's coming to you for one thing, it's not just, hey, I need a little toxin in my 40s. It's what's going on with your hormones, what's going on with your sleep, what's going on, with your stress level, and what can we do to kind of put all those together? Is it a peptide program, with some GLPs? Is it energy-based devices along with skin boosters, along with Sculptra, along with fillers and toxin, and hormones? It's basically looking at the person as a whole. So that's what I see coming up, and also skincare, really, really big.
Mm, yeah.
At home skincare, at home devices. Those are the big things that's coming up.
Awesome. Wow. Yeah. What you mentioned there, 100%, the menopause movement, like you mentioned, and also, I think there's more integration when it comes to, you nailed it on the top with not just Botox and fillers, but there's aesthetics, wellness, there's, energy, longevity, anti-aging really coming together. And with that then comes the need for a lot of, education to educate people in the industry, obviously patients. How do you approach that from the patient education stamp?
Yeah. And then the other thing I didn't even talk about was the diagnostics part of it, which answers your question. And then the GLP one part of it, right? That's also changed
Mm,
our industry a lot. So the
yeah,
menopause movement, the GLPs, where people just, number one, spending the money on the GLPs, right? And then, like losing all this weight and then now needing stuff. So I feel like
for
those two
sure.
things,
Big changes.
yeah, big changes. And then of course the social media, people like, dissolving their faces now. But yeah, just
Hmm.
to answer your question, I think from a patient standpoint, patients want education. Everyone can get educated now with ChatGPT, going on TikTok to see what
Yeah.
their skin influencer is doing. But what is the real education, right? And so I think it's important for us to always educate our patients. I think the diagnostics is a big thing. AI is a big thing. Way that I think the consultation is a big part of educating our patients and seeing what's going on. We have a skin analysis. We have the Alma IQ as a skin analysis. I think it's important for them to kind of objectively see what's going on, with their wrinkle score, with their UV score, with their rosacea, just everything that's going on, and then actually coming up with a customized plan, a blueprint for them, so that they can understand these are the things that you're not even seeing on a visible level, but that's coming up in the next few years, and you need to address that so you can prevent it. So I think you just add a P before rejuvenation, you get prejuvenation, right? So just like prevention, I think is a big part of what we're doing with our patients, in addition to educating them, being on social media. Having a voice, and we talked about this, having a voice, amplifying your voice on social media with education and on stages is important, because once they come to you,
Mm,
you want your patients to trust you before they walk in through the door.
right.
And that's exactly what social media allows, right? They allow people to fly in from all over to trust you and say, Dr. Lana, I will do whatever you say. Because if you give
Mm,
me free reign to do what I think is going to be best for you, versus you telling me, I want this product, I want this in a certain way, I want this injected and not with the cannula, it doesn't work. You're not going to get the best results, because I know what I can do in my hands. I know from the first moment that I'm looking at your face, what I could do for your face. So if they allow me to have that creative, artistic ability to use my knowledge, to use my skill, to use my injections, to use my hands, to make them, get to their aesthetic goals, that's going to be the best thing. So that's what I would say. My patient
mm.
trusting me before they come in through the door.
That's awesome. And one thing as well is that is your personalities. There's the skills. There's getting yourself out there. There's educating also in your own way as well. And what you said as far as getting that patient to know you, to like you, and trust you before they even come into the practice is, I think it's not only important today, but it's just really critical for patient 2.0 and for aesthetic practice 2.0, for business 2.0. What would you say for with our listeners? We have the entrepreneurs are starting their businesses, they're doing an odd social post here or there. What type of velocity are you doing from a social media standpoint, and how important do you see that to the growth and education that you're doing in the marketplace?
When 2020 hit, and in the hub of New York City, where everything shut down, I posted 3 times a day on social
Yeah.
media. And I went from like 30,000 followers to like 90,000 followers, like just from that like time frame. So, I mean, it took me years and years to grow my social media following, but a lot of posting, I think in the beginning, really worked. I think now it's less about the amount of times that you're posting. I still post every day. I post every day on both, LC Medical and Dr. Lana, and then I also post on my TikTok.
Mm.
And people are coming at my, from my TikTok, which I was like surprised about. People also come to me from Reddit. If you make it on Reddit, that means you're really, really good. So people start coming to see me
Love
on
that.
Reddit. And so I think just putting yourself out there, I think is really important. Where was I going with this before Reddit? Because I have a story about Reddit. But in any case, I think, I do think it's important to, answering your question. I think it's the quality of the video because algorithms change all the time. But I think it's the quality. And can I just say one thing, Bref,
Absolutely.
is I know that we're really scared about having negative comments. I know we're
Mm.
really scared to put ourselves out there. In fact, one of my social media team members actually said, "Don't put yourself out there. Like now is not the time to put yourself out there. In fact, don't boast, don't say anything, don't show what you're doing because people will come after you." So there is a target on your back when you look successful. People will come after you, and I've had my share of people coming after me still to this day. Um, but here's what I want to say. I want to say that engagement is engagement. And I'm trying to have thicker skin. Nobody likes to be trolled. Nobody likes
Mm.
negative comments. No one wants to hear negative things. But believe it or not, the most successful influencers and social media personalities have a lot of trolls. And it drives the algorithm. So now, it's not just how well are you liked, but it's almost like, are you controversial? It's almost like,
Mm.
are you disliked?
Yeah.
Because if you look on people on YouTube, even the disliked people, the hands down, the thumbs down, they're getting more engagement and they're getting more eyeballs. So is it just like a game now of like who is the most controversial, who gets the most eyeballs, so it basically the
Hmm.
bottom line, Bref, is you be you, don't be anybody else. There are a lot of people who are very negative that get a lot of engagement because they're negative. I don't want to be that person. I'm not
Yeah.
negative. I want to build people. I don't want to strip people down and talk badly about people. I don't want to build my community with negativity. That's not who I am. If that's who you are, there are people that you can follow. So just be yourself. Be your true, authentic self, and people will, follow you for you. So I post
I
every
love that.
day.
I love that. So post every day, be authentic self. And what you mentioned, Dr. Lana, as well. I always remember when Gary Vee, I was listening to him a few years ago, and he was speaking about, and I think we're there, we have been for a while, the attention economy, right? So whether you're adored by a percentage of the marketplace or trolled by a percentage of the marketplace, because we live in a world of Pepsi or Coke and blue or red and all this kind of stuff. So I think what you mentioned is 100% correct. Engagement. And then when you get into the scientific part with the algorithms, yes, the algorithms is looking for, is this content getting attention? And if it is, that's good for the users and good for everybody within that ecosystem. So 100% you nailed that. When it comes to engagement and people learning more and finding out more about what you do, what would be the best way for them to connect and to learn more about your journey and what's happening within your businesses?
Instagram, I think, is the best way. Dr. Lana, spelled out DoctorLanna. You see what I'm doing. I always think if someone's successful and already trailblazed, look to see what they're doing. And have them as a mentor versus hating on them, right? And so I'm happy to mentor anybody. And I'm also I have my mentors. And I think the most successful people are very open to having multiple mentors and always having open mind. We can always be educated. You can always learn from other people. I learned from you, Bref, today, so I'm so thankful for being on this podcast with you, for you to invite me. Yeah, so I think just being open minded and mentoring, but also you know be mentored as well is important.
I I love that. And to be honest, I haven't met a successful business owner or successful coach even who doesn't have a coach or have that support system. So love that growth mindset, the ability to to be a lifelong learner. We've covered so much today, from your family's journey, your personal journey, the adversity, building the businesses, what's happening within the aesthetic space, the some of the things that are working when it comes to attention and getting brands out there. Is there anything else, any other messages that you'd like to relay to our audience, anything to tie together as we wrap up the show today?
Yeah, I always think to myself, this one question that a podcaster asked me. And she was this 25-year-old girl who, came from nothing and, multiple seven figures. She had me on her podcast.
Mm.
And she asked me, if you at 80 years old can give yourself advice, and then you as your 8-year-old self giving you the same advice as you are now, what advice would that be? And I remember thinking about that, and it took me by surprise because I've never been asked that before. And I actually was, usually I like, spitfire, I'm like, very on top of it. But I literally was like almost crying because I was like, what would my 8 years old self tell me, So I do think that, at the end of the day, wherever you are in your journey, just remember you are doing enough. You are enough. Whatever you're doing is enough. So, at the end of the day, what will your 80-year-old self tell you? And what will your 8-year-old self tell you? If you can answer those questions, I think it gives
Mm.
you a path of like where you are in life. And it's okay. It's okay. You don't have to be at the top of everything. It's okay that if you fail multiple times, your 80-year-old self would still tell you you did amazing. And your 8-year-old self would say, go you. I'm so proud of everything that you did.
Wow, that really is that's beautiful, and I love the way that that question was asked as well. A lot of stuff to kind of reflect on there, I think, and that's a real gold nugget to wrap with. Is there any other advice that you would give to anybody? Anything that's stood you well throughout your career, throughout your life, Dr. Lanna?
Build relationships. They are the most important thing to help you succeed and to help them succeed. Build relationships with, aligning yourself with being genuine and being a good person. Don't take shortcuts in life. Don't take shortcuts in your business. Be a good person.
Love it. I love it. Well, with that, I'll have to ask you, for anybody listening, can we have you back sometime? Because we just scraped the surface in all this today.
Yes, absolutely. Yes, I would love to. I feel like I can learn a lot from you, and I never really have time to listen to podcasts. So maybe next time I'm gonna like be the host and like get more from you because you are such a wealth of knowledge, and everyone who's
Well,
listening to
thank
the
you.
podcast is so lucky. We're also grateful to have you be such a like a wise host and give so much value to your listeners.
Awesome. Thanks so much. I love doing this. This is, from starting the podcast just a few months ago, essentially. This truly is one of the favorite things that I do today because I love the relationship part. It helps me to develop relationships. It really helps me to help others to convey stories. And I really like doing that. I like helping to connect dots. And that's one of the ways I love to make impact within the world. Thanks again. Thanks so much for joining the show. We really appreciate it. And make sure everybody who's listening checks out Dr. Lanna's handles. And that was at Dr. Lanna, right? That's the social. Perfect.
Yes.
Awesome. Dr. Lanna, thanks so much.
Thank you so much. Have a wonderful day, guys. Take care.
This is the Aesthetics Growth Podcast.